Hey team, this is an ATP geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. This is a Ukraine War Update Extra video, giving the extra tidbits and nuggets to get your teeth into to give you a greater understanding of the war in Ukraine. I've recorded this already. YouTube wasn't having any of it, so I'm chopping it up. This is a smaller video than it was before. I'm trying to see whether it's the sniper part they don't like or the things on ATACMS, stuff I've talked about for the last year and a half, but now they seem to hate it. But they didn't before. I know this is an ongoing thing and you guys aren't so interested, but anyway, it's kind of annoying for me. But look, I've got a birthday present. There it is. That's pretty cool, isn't it? Thanks, the missus. She did a good job there. Anyway, I just thought I'd share that with you. I am going to hand you over to myself now, talking about ATACMS and see if they hate that. Topic. I was going to talk ATACMS. Now, there's a couple of threads I've been meaning, as soon as Colby Badouar came up with a 72 tweet thread on ATACMS, I was like, I've got to share that with you, but it's so big I don't know I can justify that, and I just haven't done enough extras recently. Well, actually, someone's done a similar thread that's referred a lot to his, and I'm going to dip into it at the end of the thread because most of this thread is about the unitary warhead for ATACMS. ATACMS more normally has a unitary single warhead that explodes and then causes fragmentation. And, you know, this thread talks a lot about that. Well, if the US are going to give the cluster munition variant, and let's go and dip into the details of that, because I don't know whether they will get the unitary warhead version. Right. He goes on to say, so he says, this implies the ATACMS M57 unitary warhead variant, like Storm Shadow, Scalp EG, and Taurus, is primarily designed for point effect purposes and has a limited capability for creating area effects. That's what I was talking about, fragmentation. So yes, it's going to explode and most of the damage is going to be done here, but it does do fragmentation, and he talks about that fragmentation. But he says, to achieve area effects, the M39A1 variant is required. So that's what we're going to look at. So the M39A1 variant is equipped with M74 sub-munitions that scatter over a wide area. Upon detonation, they create a dense and overlapping fragment cloud, which can cause significant damage to a broader range of targets due to the size, weight, and velocities of their fragments. Now, I was looking at a video yesterday of one of the cluster munition shells hitting, and I noticed when those cluster munitions were being used, I was quite surprised at how small those sub munitions were, and I was like, oh, they don't look to do massive amounts of damage, quite a lot of them, but they operate in a circle, and the explosion, like I think there's a single explosion in the middle, and then much further out you get a ring of sub munitions exploding, and I saw a number of Russian soldiers walking through, you know, down a pathway or whatever, out on the edge of a field, and a cluster munition exploding, and them getting that ring of submunitions exploding pretty much on them, and all of them were able to just move on fine. Like there were no casualties from what I could see. There might have been casualties, I don't know, there might have been injuries, but it appeared that it didn't do too much damage. And there are some people that are saying that actually those cluster munitions don't really do enough damage. I mean, they are useful, and if they work, if you get it just right, then yeah, awesome. Or they work in this context, but not so much in that context. And we have seen casualties being taken out by these cluster munitions, of course. But there are also times where we've seen them be somewhat ineffective. And of course, something like this is much bigger. I mean, you take that idea and make it a lot bigger, and it's far more effective. Now, right, let's go on. So, as others have pointed out, this would be extremely useful for Ukraine, in particular to threaten and destroy aircraft hangars and airfields. If Ukraine does not receive the M39A1 variant immediately, they will hopefully have access to them in the near future. Lastly, a quick note on the ATACMS hard target penetrability. Penetrability is largely a function of warhead configuration, mass, and velocity. Considering that ATACMS has a very high terminal velocity, Mach 3, it can achieve some degree of hard target penetration. ATACMS is outmatched by Storm Shadow, Scalp EG in terms of hard target penetration. However, which are optimized to engage hardened and buried targets. ATACMS is more useful to engage softer targets of time-sensitive nature and will likely be used in that fashion. In other words, when you've got a bridge or a building that's not moving. No one's going to move that building. Let's hit it with a Storm Shadow or a Scalp or a Taurus, right? And a bridge. And you have these breach, it? Double mechanism where it explodes that then causes a hole for like the next stage in the munitions to go through and then have a secondary explosion. That's why they're good at bunkers and underground facilities like that. It's got this two-step approach, whereas something like ATACMS is much better for a time-sensitive target. In other words, if something's like, we don't need to get the airplane up in the air, get it to a position and release this missile. We're not in that much of a hurry because we know that bridge is going to be there. We've either got people are there in this building right now and they're going to move soon, or we've got a kind of moving target that's parked up. Right, get that pod on the back of the HIMARS, or drive the HIMARS to the right place. It's already loaded. It's loaded. Let's lock it onto the target, drive it there, fire it off, time sensitive, and then it hits. This is how you'd use something like that. In conclusion, it's widely understood that ATACMS alone will not win the war. However, it plays a crucial role in complementing Ukraine's long-range strike arsenal and buys the Western alliance more time to search for a more sustainable long-term long-range strike solution. Okay, well, let's go and look into this cluster variant then a little bit more, because he didn't really dip into it that much. So Pantelenko says the arrival of the APAM cluster munitions equipped ATACMS Block 1 and 1A will cause the pushback of VKS book, so the S300 and S400, so these are the different air defense systems, surface to air missile batteries out of southern Ukraine and all of Donbass, destruction of the Russian air defense. So he's saying the Cold War era video will explain the effects of the APAM variants on Russian SAM battery target types. Okay, so you can watch this.
The ability to launch two missiles in rapid succession was also proven. The first missile
this is a really old video. So this is what it does.
Spins the missile and dispenses the payload of M74 bomblets over the target.
I know, so I will make that a little bit bigger for you. So here we have them exploding and...
Spins the missile and dispenses the payload of M74 bomblets over the target. The development program was completed in the summer of 1989.
You don't really see the explosions much there, but they are much bigger than the cluster, obviously, of the cluster submunitions of the artillery.
With a highly successful operational test. Members of the 6th Battalion, 27th Field Artillery from Fort Sill, Oklahoma.
Anyway, so that's that. He goes on to say this will require a software upgrade to existing wheeled HIMARS and attract M270 launchers in Ukrainian service. So in order to fire these, there's going to be some... there might have to be some software changes, both to have the ATACMS and also, I think, to not allow the ATACMS to be sent into Russia as well. While I agree Russia-Ukrainian war is a war of material attrition, I disagree with the thought below that 100 ATACMS would not make a difference. I talked about this previously. I think they would, in that it misses Russian SAM batteries, surface-to-air missile batteries, are not made at anything approaching 100 batteries per year. In other words, you can take out the SAM defenses all across the occupied territories, and that would screw Russia completely. High-end SAM batteries like Patriot, SAMP-T, S300 V4 or S300 are made in quantities of less than a dozen batteries a year. As an ATACMS Block 1 M39 missile delivers 950 munitions in a 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer area. 100 of the Block 1 ATACMS dropped in the right places in southern Ukraine and Donbass will remove high-altitude SAM coverage from Kherson to the 1991 Russian border plus northern Crimea. So he then refers to this, which would suggest that, you know, ATACMS would mean arguably that you might have no further surface-to-air missile systems in that whole corridor, and that would be obviously huge. The lack of Russian high-altitude SAM coverage that the presumed Biden administration delivery of ATACMS will cause unlocks the high-altitude range of the JDAM-ER for the Ukrainian PSU Air Force. I've done a few posts and threads on the JDAM-ER. Okay, so what's he saying here? What this means is that the success of ATACMS can then be linked to the success of JDAMs. So JDAMs might get taken out by electronic warfare systems, or they can't be dropped close enough because surface-to-air missile systems are in position in the occupied territories. You then take out those surface-to-air missile systems, then you can bring your JDAM aircraft closer to the front line, and they can have an effect much further back behind the Russian lines. So ATACMS then releases the capability of JDAMs. JDAMs, to remind you, are the guided glide bombs that are made of dumb bombs that are given these extra capabilities, and then they can be dropped from aircraft, but they have a much longer range, and they have precision guidance as well. So they are quite susceptible to electronic warfare, or have been, but one of the biggest issues is the closer the Ukrainian airframes get to the front line, the more susceptible they are to getting hit by air defenses. You take the air defenses out, you can bring them closer to the front line, and they become more effective. Okay, so there he talks, and he's lots of threads about JDAMs, extended range JDAMs, and how good they are, and so on and so forth. So he's linking all those threads. The Russians build fewer high altitude SAM battery surface to air missile batteries in a year than the US Navy builds warships. 100 Block 1 ATACMS will cause the unlocking of high altitude airspace for PSU JDAM ER delivery on Russian logistics at ranges rivaling the Gimlers with greater lethal effects. In other words, this will unlock JDAMs to be used in a way that HIMARS were used when HIMARS first turned up. And then suddenly, Russian logistics is in a whole lot more trouble. All across the Ukrainian south at a fraction of the price of Gimlers. So the bonus being that the JDAM guided bombs are much cheaper than HIMARS rockets. There are more JDAM bombs in the US Air Force, US Navy, US Marine Corps inventories than there are Gimlers rockets in the US Army. ATACMS allowing PSU mass high altitude JDAM ER use is literally more bang for the buck. Decisive defenestration, so that's the JDAM, idea what the JDAM is. Decisive defenestration of Russian high-altitude SAMs in Ukraine by ATACMS allow for increased and deeper firepower by the PSU, the Air Force, using cheap and numerous US precision glide bombs is the definition of winning in a high-tech war of material attrition. The Mark 84 JDAM ER is a more cost-effective tool for troop barracks and weapons POL storage versus Gimlers, since one round obliterates the DMPI, desired main point of impact. One virtue of GBU 38 JDAM ER is that you can toss 4 to 8 in one delivery. So that's really important, and program each to hit, right? And I guess you can get them each to hit their own, and this is what he goes on to say next part, their own DMPI individually. So you can drop a bunch of these from one aircraft, and they get you a good destructive capability covering not just that one point, but a number of places. In the old days, you would fly along the length of a trench system and train release dumb Mark 82s. Currently with JDAM ER, PSU can get the same effect from 40 kilometers away by programming each JDAM ER to land maybe 50 to 100 meters apart along the trench system. The extermination of Russian high-altitude SAM coverage in southern Ukraine by Block 1 ATACMS means the PSU will be able to do the same thing at 92 kilometers. It can not only affect logistics behind Russian lines by getting closer to the front lines with their airframes, but they can hammer Russian trench lines along the trenches at different positions, and these will have decent explosive capabilities that will smash up that trench line. The extermination of Russian high-altitude SAM coverages. Oh yeah, so it is due to this incredible utility at killing Russian air defenses in southern Ukraine that makes me think it will be months before the Biden administration will deliver ATACMS, like with the GLSDB, F-16s, and M1 Abrams tanks. I'd really like to be wrong about slow walking. Okay, so we know he's anti-Biden administration and is frustrated, as we all are, at how long it takes for weapons to get there. What the reasons were for ATACMS not to be delivered, I guess we'll find out eventually, but hopefully they will be delivered, and I really hope they get delivered soon. I'm just really annoyed that it has given the Russians a chance to remove their their airframes from occupied territories in advance of such a delivery. Right, I'm going to leave it here. I'm going to leave you with one. What have we got? Yeah, it's time is getting on. I'm going to leave you with this bit of Ukrainian trolling. It is in Ukrainian, so I'm going to leave it playing for the jaunty music. It's a minute worth of them trolling the Russians about the use of tires as a defense for their planes, and it goes on to talk about it in lots of ways. So it is in Ukrainian. You can read the subtitles. I'm not going to read them to you, so I'll just let this play for a minute. It's just fabulous, great stuff.
Россия – самая технологичная страна в мире, ведь только здесь в полной мере смогли раскрыть невероятный потенциал покрышек. На основе уникальной резиновой технологии разработано антидроновое покрытие, способное отразить любую атаку беспилотников. А упругий резиновый панцирь на танке не способен пробить ни один вражеский снаряд. Система передвижения Sonic позволит быстро преодолеть самые сложные участки на поле боя. И даже если боец случайно влетит в водоем, активация резиновой спасательной капсулы решит эту проблему. Для пехоты же разработано 3 комплекта уникальной брони – легкой, средней и максимальной защиты. Эта резиновая кольчуга обладает невероятной прочностью и мобильностью и позволит выполнять самые сложные задачи без угрозы для своей жизни. Вступайте же в отряды резиновых задниц, самые защищенные войска России.
Absolutely brilliant. Love a bit of that. There you go. That's a little bit of amusement for you. Please take care of yourselves. Thank you so much for your continued support. Thank you for your kind well wishing on me old birthday today. Not that, whatever. But thank you. It's really generous. Thank you for all the members who are supporting the channel. And I'm going to give a personal shout out to individual people tomorrow in one of my videos. So thank you very much. Take care. Speak soon. So that's just a little snippet about snipers. I will speak to you tomorrow about something else. Take care. Thank you for your support. Toodle pips.